So I'm getting ready to get under this Cj-7 and I'm going to change this transmission rear output seal. So here's the transfer case front input seal, and the transmission one goes right here, but it's in the transmission. So I'm going to go double check and make sure this is going to be the right size for the transmission. A big tip when you're doing seals and any kind of work like this, always make sure it fits both surfaces, both ID and OD. The ID's checked with this shaft, but the OD, I gotta go hold it up to the transmission. There's nothing worse than pulling a seal and not having the right one to replace it, or getting a seal in and realizing it's too small to go over the shaft or something, and you wreck the seal or have to get a different one. So I'm gonna go under this CJ and I'll kind of show you what's going on and the reason why I'm changing this seal. It looks pretty crusty. So here's the transmission rear output seal. You can see it's kind of a rust color in there, and we're gonna just hold this seal up and make sure that it appears to be the same OD, which it does. So gonna get that popped out, replace the seal, and I'll show you a little trick on that seal when I install it to help prevent the spring from popping out. You can use a couple different, a tool or a method. I'm gonna use this hook. You put it in here, you kind of cock it against the shaft, and you hit right here where my fingers are with the hammer and go around side to side, and that will pull that seal out. I'm gonna come back with a razor blade, scrape all this off, clean the holes out, wire brush it, brake clean it, and get this all ready to go. I will put a thin layer of silicone around the outside and the bolt holes. I'll probably do that on the transfer case side so I know where to put the silicone, then just blindly putting it on this big flat face. Do that, change this transmission seal. This is actually missing what's called a strut mount. So there's another mount that bolts underneath this transmission mount. It's like a piece of C-channel, and it comes out with a strut mount, which is like a shaft with a couple bushings and washers to help this with torque load. So when you accelerate, decelerate, the drivetrain's trying to twist in the vehicle, and that strut mount eliminates the bell housing from breaking, or the mounts on the transmission or transfer case from breaking. That is missing that. I ordered the guy one from my buddy Rob in Tucson, and this customer can put it in himself or bring it back at a later date. I'll do that. Gonna get this thing buttoned up and out of here though today. I'll show a video a little bit later of this all cleaned up and what it looks like with the seal, how to install that correctly, that kind of stuff. So I got this all cleaned up and had a little surprise moment. This is an SR4 tranny, and it's made to mount up to several different things, so it had a couple extra holes here. I cleaned the silicone out of a couple and got up to this big hole, and it goes right into the shift tower. So the transfer case only goes to here. That would leave this hole half exposed to just puke out gear oil. So I went through all my bins of plastic plugs and rubber plugs and vacuum caps and all kinds of stuff. This is the closest cap I found. I'm gonna coat this pretty generously in silicone and glue that right in there with the transfer case here, and then I'll put a little on the outside. With the transfer case here, it's gonna keep that tight and it should seal no problem. It's not high pressure or anything and should work just fine. The next thing I was gonna go over is that's the seal that goes there. So I'm gonna drive this seal in, and I wanna give you guys a couple different options here. So this is a transmission and transfer case seal driver by Snap-on. They make different inserts to go in here to drive seals and transmission transfer cases. Thing works really slick. What this does is it holds on a lip seal. There's a spring on the inside where this black rubber is. There's a spring. So if you have this fancy seal driver, you get one that has a little tension on the inside, and that will put pressure on the spring, and when you go to drive it in, it will keep the spring from flying off. If you do not have a fancy driver, you can take some transmission grease. This is the gold, which is one of the thinner ones. But if you use the green or the blue in here, the gold will work too. It also will hold that spring in. So I could get a socket and drive this seal in, or something round that will help me drive that seal in flush and not have a fancy driver. So a couple different options. You can pack the back of the seal with grease, not like wheel bearing grease, but a heavier trans grease, or spend the money and buy a set of these seal drivers. There might be other companies that make them. The Snap-on set's pretty complete. This, I think, has like 12 or 13 different inserts, and this driver, you can hit that with a dead blow or something, and it works real good. So I'm gonna put a little thin coat of silicone on the outside of this seal, wipe the grease I got on it on the outside off, put a thin coat of silicone, and then use this driver and drive it in. I wouldn't have to use this driver, could use something else with the grease, but I just wanted to show you both options. And then glue this little butt plug in. So I have the transmission rear output seal installed. It's nice and flat. I put a thin coat of silicone around it and drove it in. I also silicone this butt plug in here. It's pretty flat. I mean, sticks up just, I don't know, maybe 5/6 thousandths, but it's pretty thin plastic. So I'm ready to bolt the transfer case in place. I'm going to put a thin coat of silicone on the face of the transfer case where these holes line up, and right before I put it in, I'll put a thin coat of silicone over this, and then put a little lube on the input gear of the transfer case and slip it up into place, bolt it down, and this thing will be about ready to roll. So I'm working on the Cj-7, and when I was taking it apart, I put my hand up on the drive shaft and wiggled the slip and had a tremendous amount of play. So I went ahead and ordered a replacement, took the measurements and ordered a replacement from Tom Woods. Absolutely no question in my mind, Tom Woods makes the best shafts on the market. I've been using them for years and years. Even 20 years ago when I worked at Four Wheeler Supply, we were using Tom Woods shafts. So super good quality. They use their X spline on this, so it has a little more travel than factory. Had them put spicer joints in it, non-greasable, and a dust boot. This setup holds up the best here in Arizona, so non-greasable dust boot and the spicer joints. So check out Tom Woods if you need a drive shaft. Top shelf as it gets. So I've got the Cj-7 pretty much done. I need to take it off the jack stands. I need to fill the transfer case with gear oil and top the transmission off. So did quite a bit of work on this for the short time I had it. I fixed the rear axle so the wheel hub had spun on the axle shaft. The splines were gone on the wheel hub. Axle was all galled, so I replaced the axle shaft on the rear, the wheel hub, bearings, or the bearing axle seals, re-shimmed it. I also pulled the transfer case, rebuilt it, all new bearing seals. It's all freshened up. I replaced a couple gears in there that were bad. I replaced the seal between the transmission and the transfer case. That was all crusty. The transmission mount. And then up front, I put a new Tom Woods drive shaft up front. Measured that out. Troy over there hooked me up as usual. Top shelf stuff there, Tom Woods. And the transfer case turned out pretty sanitary. I got a little silicone spots on it from this Ultra Gray. Doesn't quite dry as fast as it used to. My shop's climate control, they have AC on in here. It's probably 77, 78 degrees in here, not humid. And this stuff still takes quite a while to dry, so I don't know if they changed the formula or something on that. But also on the drive shaft, Tom Woods supplied me with new straps and bolts, and I replaced the rear ones too. They had some kind of chain guard stuff back there. So I'm gonna get this back to the customer. I'm sure they'll be back for me to do some more work. I know the rear brakes need done, something with this exhaust, and it's just a old worn out CJ7. So stay tuned, got lots of projects going on. See what I'm gonna work on next.